What are hormones and what is a hormonal imbalance?
Hormones are these chemical messages in the body. And I think of them like text messages. They tell different parts of the body to do something. There's 5 ways that the body communicates with itself. Hormones, first and foremost, peptides, proteins, nutrients, and the genome. We want to be working with these different systems and not against them. So what is hormone imbalance? It's when this exquisite state of homeostasis in the body gets out of balance. And so that can happen in women with endometriosis or polycystic ovary syndrome. It can happen in men with low testosterone. It can happen with your cortisol if you're someone who's chronically stressed and you're not attending to it. So there's ways that hormones get out of balance, but there's also ways to easily get back into a state of homeostasis.
What are some of the most common ways that we end up with a hormonal imbalance that you see in the modern day?
Well, I would say stress is number one. So we've got this stress response system, and I think a lot of people consider stress sort of this feeling, but the truth is you can measure stress. You can measure your cortisol. You can do it in the blood in the morning. You can also measure it at 4 points during the day and look at your stress response to see if there's a way that it's getting pulled out of balance. There's lots of ways to deal with that, but I would say measurement is really critical. So that's one piece. Another is genomics. So some people have a greater risk of developing something like polycystic ovary syndrome, where you've got too much androgen or testosterones. There's also hormone imbalances that are related to other sex hormones, like your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone. It can lead to infertility, can lead to acne and other problems.
Do we have the tools to measure stress at home, or do we have to go take a test?
No, you can do it at home. So I usually start by doing it at a lab because I think working with a clinician who's knowledgeable about hormones is the best way to begin. Otherwise, you're getting all this information, you may not know what to do with it. But increasingly, we're disintermediating the medical system because I would say the medical system has really failed a lot of people with hormone imbalances. And so testing can be a valuable way to look at it at home in addition to what you can get at the lab.
And what are you learning at the lab? Like, what are they testing? What chemicals are they seeing? What are you hoping to see? Like, is it a percentage scale? Is it a rating of 1 out of 10? Like, where are we trying our stress to land throughout the day?
It depends on what hormone you're measuring. So when it comes to stress, cortisol is the main stress hormone, but there's others too, like DHEA. So what we're looking for, if you measure a blood cortisol in the morning, you want it to be about 10 to 15. That's the optimal range, which is different than the normal range. So normal is what we tend to use in mainstream medicine. It's what I was taught to use, but I don't necessarily want to be like the average American. I want to be in a more optimal state. So that's the optimal state. If you measure it in the afternoon, it's more like you want your level to be about 5 to 10. So that's what we want with cortisol. DHEA and other hormones often vary depending on age. So generally with DHEA, I like to see more than 100 in women, more than 150 in men.
Got it. And if you're seeing yourself outside of that 5 to 10 in the morning, I'm assuming above?
We want to see it about 10 to 15 in the morning.
And so above that is negative or below that is bad?
Both.
Both. Okay.
So with all hormones, I can't think of a single exception. You want it to be in this Goldilocks zone of not too high and not too low.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started measuring my cortisol, this was in my 30s, I found that it was about 3 times what it should be.
Wow.
So I was someone who was a bit of a stress junkie. I was just sort of used to running on adrenaline and running on cortisol. And so if it's too high, that can be causing too much wear and tear in the body. And if it's too low, that can be a stress response system that has become exhausted.
Understood. And so stress was one of the first ones when we were talking about hormonal imbalance. What was the second?
Well, your sex hormones can get out of balance. Another system that's critical is your metabolic system. So this includes hormones like insulin, glucagon, but insulin is really the star of the show here.
Talk to me about the importance of insulin and the impact that it has. I think we've all heard about it. We may understand a little about it, but not enough.
Yeah, insulin is like the bouncer at a club. that determines whether to let glucose into the club or not. So the club here is your cell. If you're someone who has insulin that's working well, it's in that Goldilocks position, fasting of about 5 to 7, then you're letting glucose into the cell. You're able to use it as fuel. You feel good. You're not storing excessive fat. But if you are someone who has insulin resistance, where your cells become numb to insulin, your insulin can climb, and that leads to more fat storage. It leads to glucose not getting into the club. And so the streets are full with glucose. Your bloodstream is full of glucose. And that's where fasting glucose starts to rise. And you can pick that up in a blood test. You can also pick it up on a continuous glucose monitor.
And what's the negative effects of having glucose on the streets?
Well, there's a lot. So having high glucose causes damage to your blood vessels. That's especially important in women because lower levels in the prediabetes range of, somewhere between 100 to 125 can set you up for high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease later on. And that's different than what we see in men. So they tend to have vascular damage at a higher fasting glucose. So I think women especially need to pay attention to this.
What's the difference between hormones for men and women? What are the key differences that you see? Because I think that's, again, something we're not that well versed in at the moment.
There's a lot of differences. I mean, it's important, first of all, to realize that we all have all of these hormones. Women and men just have different amounts. So if you think of what's classically thought of as a male hormone, testosterone, women have about 1/10 what men have. But still, we're exquisitely sensitive to it. And so we want that Goldilocks zone when it comes to women. With other hormones like estrogen, men make it too. If your estrogen's too low, that can lead to problems with bone loss for men. And then for women, it has about 400 jobs. So it's related to brain health. It's related to memory. It's related to whether you are growing things inside your uterus, like fibroids, endometriosis elsewhere in the body. So you want these hormones to be in a balance. And generally, they vary depending on your sex.
What are the hormone deficiencies you're seeing in women the most at the moment and in men?
Well, for both men and women, for people who've got a stress response issue, this can start to rob you of some of the sex hormones that you really need to function well. So what I see, especially for people in their 20s, starting around 27 to 28, if you are a high stress person, like I used to be, that can lead to problems with falling testosterone. And so increasingly we're seeing low testosterone in men. We can see that in women as well. So it can start as early as your 20s. Other hormone deficiencies or insufficiencies include with your thyroid. So thyroid is one of those hormones that is kind of like the gas pedal. Almost every cell in your body has a receptor for thyroid hormone. And if you're low, then that can lead to fatigue, weight gain, constipation, feeling like you just don't have the energy that you once did. You might lose the outer third of your eyebrows, have hair loss on your head. So that's a common issue that we see in terms of hormone imbalances. Women much more commonly than men. It's about 7 to 9 times more common in women. And the root cause of low thyroid function most of the time is autoimmune. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the typical cause.
I mean, these are things that I feel like so many people are struggling and suffering with today. And I don't know how quickly we're able to pinpoint that it's a hormonal imbalance. It seems like we're trying to solve it in different ways, whether that be weight gain or hair loss or whatever it may be. We often think that we're almost not always working to the root cause of the issue. But I feel like what you're saying is the hormones are the root cause.
Yeah, and I would say start there. What happens for a lot of folks is that they feel tired. They feel like they just don't have the energy when they wake up in the morning. They don't feel fully restored after they sleep. And they assume that it's some sort of moral failing or that they need to change their mindset. And I would say, let's start with your biology before we go to the place of moral failing. Let's start with measuring your hormones and measuring the right hormones, looking at your stress response. So you can look at cortisol, but you can also look at heart rate variability, that time between each of your heartbeats. That tells you a lot about your stress response system and about your ability to regulate your nervous system.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was saying this to you before we started. I feel like I've always been someone who's tried to solve things at the mind. And that's been very good for me. I feel like it strengthened my mind in incredible ways. But it was only when I started to unlock the potential and capacity of the body that I was actually able to have this two-pronged approach to making a shift in my life. And I remember in the past, I remember even when I was a monk and I sometimes struggled to wake up in the morning to meditate, I always felt it was a moral failing. And I think so many people today could relate to the fact that you wake up and you don't want to go to work and you think, oh, it's because I hate my job. Or you wake up in the morning and you're feeling rushed and frazzled and you're thinking, oh gosh, I just have so much to do and I'm failing at it. And the reality is that there could be a hormonal imbalance that's actually making you feel that way, that is then making it harder to love your job, find meaning, or support your family. And it's a much stronger place to start because you'll actually feel the benefits quicker. How quickly can we create a shift in a hormonal imbalance to being back into the homeostasis?
Well, I so appreciate this framing because I think the answer is both. The answer is both and. So look at the mindset, look at the way your mind is functioning, look at your cognition, but also look at your biology. Put them together. So how quickly can you turn this around? It depends on the hormone. When it comes to a hormone like insulin, you can change it with your food and exercise in 3 days.
3 days?
3 days. So food is such an important driver of what your body is doing. So going back to these 5 ways that the body communicates with itself. Hormones are number 1. There's peptides, proteins, your genome, and nutrients. So nutrients here drive so much of your hormonal balance. Now, other hormones like estrogen, progesterone, those two are kind of like a set of tango partners. Those take longer to adjust. They take more like 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, but that's still not that long.
That's not that long.
That's not terrible at all. I think sometimes when you hear about these things, you go, oh God, it's going to take me like 3 years. It's refreshing to hear that 3 days and 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, that's doable. That's realistic.
It's doable. And there was a study also looking at folks with high testosterone, women with high testosterone. And they found that by reducing the carbohydrates in your diet, within 7 days, you can actually change your testosterone levels. So some of this can happen sooner with the right messages, with the right orchestra that's happening in the body.
What are the main reasons in our 20s and 30s do we see a decline in estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone?
They're each a little different. So if we take estrogen first, the most common reason I see for decline is women who are not eating enough. They're not getting the nutrients that they need. They're not getting the calories that they need to have the control hormones, luteinizing hormone in particular, help them ovulate each month. So their estrogen might be lower. We also think that exposure to toxins and endocrine disruptors can affect your estrogen levels and also thyroid levels. It can also affect testosterone. The other reason I see is women who have premature ovarian insufficiency. So this is mostly focused on women in their 20s and 30s. So premature ovarian insufficiency is not an immune process where the ovaries are attacked by your immune system. And you can start to have symptoms of early perimenopause and menopause, including low estrogen. So these are women in their 20s and 30s who have hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings. And you have to check labs to see if that's the cause. When it comes to testosterone, the number one thing that I see that leads to low testosterone in women is having a heightened stress response. So high stress, being kind of run by cortisol like I was in my 30s, that can then rob you of the production of testosterone. Another factor that affects testosterone is insulin. So if you're someone with high insulin levels, that can affect the ovaries and lead to dysregulation of testosterone. Usually high testosterone is something we see with one of the types of polycystic ovary syndrome. Progesterone is an interesting one for people who are not ovulating every single month. Their control system is a little wonky. We see something called late luteal phase disorder. And that's where you're just not making as much progesterone. And it can be related to the health of the eggs that are in your ovaries. It may be helpful to look at your egg quality to do a day 3 FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and estradiol level, and then a day 21 or 22 progesterone. So normally on day 21 or 22, if you ovulated around day 14, you want your progesterone to be about 10 to 15 or higher. So if it's lower, that can be because your egg quality is potentially declining or there's some kind of nutrient that needs to be addressed. Increasingly, Jay, this is super interesting that I've been reading a lot about. The cells in your body that have the most mitochondria, those powerhouses of the cell that produce fuel, produce energy, the cells that have the highest concentration is your eggs. In men, it's the sperm. So when your mitochondria are not working well because you're sedentary, you've got too much stress, you're not getting the right nutrients, it can show up in your eggs first. And you might see it with like a low progesterone level. So tracking your mitochondria, getting things like morning light when you first wake up in the morning, managing your stress response so that it's not running the show, getting all the nutrients that support your mitochondria, maybe even some supplements like CoQ10, that can be a way to support your mitochondria to prevent some of these problems.
For someone who's struggling with weight loss, what hormonal imbalance could they be experiencing?
First, I think about insulin because insulin is really the king of metabolism. So I would say, look at your insulin, look at your glucose. Insulin changes first. It can change 7 to 14 years before your glucose changes. And probably the best way to look at insulin is to do what's called a 2-hour glucose challenge test, where you look at your insulin and glucose fasting an hour later and 2 hours later. You give a 75-gram carb load to see how your body responds. So fasting insulin can change, but it changes typically after postprandial insulin. So measuring is really critical. When it comes to weight, another factor is in women having excess testosterone. In women, high testosterone is similar to low testosterone in men. So it can lead to metabolic dysfunction. It can lead to cardiovascular risk. It can lead to fatigue and mood changes. So I like to look at androgens, testosterone, DHEA. And then another factor, especially in women, is having estrogen and progesterone out of balance. So if you've got too much estrogen, typical story, compared to progesterone, that leads to something called dysestrogenism. If you have excess estrogen in the body, it can lead to more mood swings. It can lead to more eating habits that you may not want to be supporting. It can lead to more structural changes in your body. So it's important to have these in balance. Thyroid is another critical one. And then I would say cortisol is really important when it comes to weight gain, because a lot of people don't realize that the stress that they have in their system, in their body, could be driving their deposition of belly fat. It could be driving food cravings. It could be changing, we know people with depression, about half of them have high cortisol levels. And that can then affect the way that you eat, the way that you move, the way that you think, and the risk of weight gain.
As a normal human being who is struggling to deal with work responsibilities, commitments to our partners, challenges with intimacy, someone who's trying to take care of their kids, it already feels like you have so many factors of your exterior world that you're struggling with. You're juggling all of these things. And then at the same time, now you've opened up to us this interior world of all of these other things that we're like, oh yeah, I probably need to figure out my cortisol, and I'm sure there's some insulin stuff I need to work on. And it sounds like I've got too much or too little testosterone, whatever it may be. Like there's almost like this waking up to the fact that all of this exterior difficulty is matched with some sort of interior imbalance. Where would you recommend someone to start if they're starting from zero and thinking, this feels like a lot, it feels overwhelming?
Start with cortisol. There's a few reasons for that. Cortisol is the great unifier because it's involved in all of these other systems. So if you're a high cortisol person, it might be affecting your insulin. It might be dropping your progesterone levels. It could be affecting your testosterone levels as early as your 20s. So I would say start with cortisol. Like the measurement there is critical.
Mm-hmm.
And you made an important link here, Jay, between your external world and your inner world. And hormones drive so much of your inner world. The more that you have a sense of the landscape of your inner terrain, the more that you're going to be able to work with it, befriend it, allow these hormones, these messages, these signals to become your friend and not be, some villain that you're blaming for the way that you're feeling.
What are the top 3 things someone could do today to decrease stress? What should they be focused on?
Well, I would say number 1, measure, like know what you're dealing with. What you measure improves. So know where you're starting. I think a benchmark is critical. Number 2, I started learning yoga from my great grandmother when I was 5 years old. I started practicing meditation when I was 17 in college. I think there's nothing more effective than meditation and breath work as a way of working with your cortisol. And then number 3, I would say there's supplements that can really make a difference. I don't think you can out-supplement a bad diet. I don't think you can out-supplement a stressful life, but you can really work with supplements like phosphatidylserine, very effective at reducing cortisol at a dose of 400 milligrams, omega-3s, so taking fish oil or a more plant-based source of omega-3s. Those are really critical. And then 4th, I would say, look at your relationships. They're often a common source of stress in the body. And a lot of people don't put those things together. So when you've got a relationship with someone that is co-regulating, that allows your nervous system to calm down and reduce your cortisol to that Goldilocks position, that is so effective